So calculated time Akufo insist ye na aban MPP aban ejina so say yen jeli Tsatsu Tsikata na ka be 6 months na Akufo efri aban mu na omu hia bibi dia ye campaign sene be yanko mo betime wini campaign no into omu hwehwe ma no say oh Tsatsu ayawunani yen jeli no tie into omu ko twe Tsatsu fi GMPC and omu insist say I was say jeli Tsatsu Tsikata into now moment ready the AC yankasa at this point no a mark for aban ejina so can say they need to jail Tsatsu Tsikata for 5 years and then aka 6 months now Akufo Addo ne ba omi aban no aden a ende right now we are faced with another possible judgment against the NDC because the MPP no they want to jail Ato Forson. Now we read the second paragraph. Now this is what it says. It says this. All right, Mr. On this day in 2008, an Accra High Court found Tsatsu Tsikata guilty of willfully causing financial loss to the state, a conviction that shocked the nation and sent ripples through Ghana's legal and political landscape. Almost see, a year 2008 around June, and a year court, Ghana. A year high court, a jeli Tsatsu Tsikata say a year Tsatsu Tsikata a cause financial loss to the state. Sata na J. Kufour and a year president. Na J. Kufour na kind of bosumi be insia no free abamu. Now, so kind of story now. Almost say on that fateful day, Tsikata stood in court without his lawyer, who was absent due to a scheduled interlocutory application. Saturday no mujeli Tsatsu na Tsatsu court se bia Ato Forson court de bia na judge nka se obe the judgment na case ne kurampo no yenkan wie ye day na Tsatsu court no na ne lawyer mpo nka no ho na ne lawyer edi application fufure chira e fa cha case no ho e the same court premises enti Tsatsu Tsikata under Akufo's regime no or court as a regular they say ende Ato Forson court no there was no indication because the case had not ended. Nobody had closed their case. The case had not finalized. They were just going to court on a normal day. Now, Tsatsu Tsikata drew court no. What happened was that na the court the lawyer knew her. Na owura court no they call any. Tsikata intended to inform the court of his lawyer's absence and seek an adjournment, and so there was no anticipation of a judgment. As two other critical applications were pending at the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. In the Tsatsu court that day, no, na Tsatsu lawyers are filing applications mienu bako ewo Supreme Court and na bako ewo infa ewo Appeals Court. Sa applications until it is heard, no judge can read a judgment. That is how it works because the applications have been submitted and received by the Appeals Court and the Supreme Court respectively. At that point, Tsatsu went to court to tell the judge, say, this is what has happened. That is why my lawyer is not even with me because an application has been filed. My lawyer is following it up. It's a mabahande meba mekacho said this is what is going on because read the judgment. There's no way you can read a judgment without my lawyer, and it has never happened. It never happens. A judge can never read a judgment without the accuser's lawyer there. You cannot just go ahead and say, I'm reading a judgment. That's why there's a notification. Yama obia notice say, ada way, and intina yebebu asema. Judge, or data, or dibu asem. O tiasem ni nyina na wa sheda. O si ada way, obia mra, sa da na mebu asem no. That means or package all the parties should be present on this date. So there's no way a judge can read judgment without all the parties knowing, and also when there is an application pending. No, it never happens. But under J.A. Kufour buying, it was possible. Mechiramo, the NPP, the way they work. Metuma catch for a fact. Ato Forson, some are me to you. Probabilities of jail Ato Forson, it is high. I'm telling you. Ya can't wamano. It is part of the NPP Omwankasa party plan. Every time they come to power, they need to use the law against somebody in the NDC. It's a fact. Court, it is something that has been arranged. A party, a party strategy, and yet ended almost 30 years. way back 16 years ago. And almost started Sasem. Now, let's move forward. Notably, the Supreme Court was deliberating on the commercial viability of Valley Farms, the cocoa producing company at the heart of Tsikata's charges. In the time Tsikata Crown Court na one oba normal court no, na Supreme Court no omo da ho ka den application na Tsatsu Tsikata to Supreme Court no through den ne lawyer. So it means the application was being considered by the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court had thrown out the application in the first place, then you will say you have a case. But that application had been accepted. It has been considered by the Supreme Court. They were contemplating or deliberating on it. So how can a judge go ahead and strike and say, I'm giving judgment today? Abra, when you go to the Supreme Court and the Appeals Court, there are applications pending which is being deliberated upon. Metro NPP no. They are dangerous people. He was accused of unlawful using the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation (GNPC) to guarantee a loan for Valley Farms while serving as its chief executive officer. Asema Akufo Addo editor Tsatsu Tsikata so ne say. Tsatsu Tsikata na o GNPC boss no. Eye company bia ye friend no eye Valley Farms no or the eye GMPC ena ekodi aginemu agi loan ema sa company ana farm no intina eye private company Valley Farms ena Akufo Addo say Tsatsu a oye GMPC boss no or the eye GMPC sika kwesia wa say sa farm no enkonkogi some loan bi inti wabo Ghana kro no eye no kre ana anya no kre. And in your court, and in Nkrata, any judges, any lawyers, now, despite the pending applications and the incomplete trial, the High Court, in an unexpected turn of event, convicted and sentenced Tsikata to 5 years on each of the 4 counts to be served concurrently. Inti, the charges for the tone so. Sade na Tsatsu Tsikata ewura court and a lawyer and so Supreme Court find a way to make sure say the Supreme Court will hear the application no. The 4 charges na 2 charges no say ba could also could them 5 years. You can say concurrently that means say jeli Tsatsu Tsikata 5 20 years but ni nyina start pe into obe 7 nyina 5 years. In the Tsatsu Tsikata court na judge can say she does not care whether his lawyer has filed an application at the Appeals Court or the Supreme Court. She did not even give a date that she was going to give judgment. Because if she had put out a date for judgment, and Tsatsu Tsikata's lawyers would be there, and the other party would know, said this is what was going to happen. Even journalists who were covering the story did not even know Tsatsu was going to be jailed that day. But when they entered the court, and one judge say the 4 the count na yada to so nyina na charges no all the 4 charges no obu na 4 ni nyina mu na sa asem na to charges no na asem na nkasa eye no kre anansa enya no kre mumendwedwam. Now when you go for it, it says this sudden decision came just days before the Supreme Court was set to rule on the commercial viability of Valley Farms, a ruling that would eventually favor Tsatsu Tsikata. In the time na Assembly Court no, Tsatsu Tsikata lawyers file application. Supreme Court to say, "Muni bibi." Assembly because wa High Court. Sa farms na almost say, Tsatsu Tsikata. Akodi the GMPC akosia wawa akoji sika ma farms no. Application na Tsatsu Tsikata lawyers file court Supreme Court and say, farm no na enye sika. GMPC form sika bi ankosia wawa. In Krata, say, sa farm way, Valley Farm way, omujina na so, no man gasa etumidi omujuma no enye. International Supreme Court no omo in the process of basically saying say ampa omajiatum. Na High Court judge no hona oye juma makufour no na omunim say because the Supreme Court that time na ye legitimate Supreme Court no. That Supreme Court then, there were Supreme Court that you could not enter and do business. In 2008, the Supreme Court we had were noble men and women who were basically looking at the issues before they pronounced judgment. But because the Attorney General then, who served under Kufour, and J.A. Kufour himself, who had diabolic mind, they used the High Court judge, to, at the end of the day, call judgment. Abrana Supreme Court was about to call the case and say no. South Valley Farms for they actually have money. They are operating in the Sobi Kase Tsatsu Tsikata and the GMPC Sika Kusia or Mamobuano because they know say Supreme Court next case in this definitely that Supreme Court 2008 the no America and then that 2008 Supreme Court they were going to say from the document before them in fact Tsatsu Tsikata was not guilty or near bonnet. But the moment Supreme Court the High Court judge cannot jail Tsatsu. And it was in the same week as Supreme Court and they knew that the Supreme Court was going to say Tsatsu Tsikata was not guilty because the valley the farms for Tsatsu did not basically use GMPC Sika to guarantee for them. Into what the NPP government then did was to go ahead of the Supreme Court. That is why, even though there was an application at the appeals court and the Supreme Court, the High Court bypassed all these powers because the president then, J.A. Kufour, had instructed the Attorney General and the judge then to call judgment that day. It's not planned from the government. What you say? Now, young queen in facts, And this is the same thing they are doing today. Yeah, we have about Ato Forson case, So this case, a Akufo Addo and a static case, Tie. Now the danko Akufo Addo and a static case way. A Hona Akufo Addo obe exposing who got show. The first time they entered court, say the Tsatsu Tsikata against J.A. Kufour, a whole Attorney General, when he was filing his case. That is how he filed the case. And a judge Nikache Akufo Addo say you are dumb. This is the Tsatsu Tsikata against the states, against Ghana. It is not a fight between Tsatsu and Kufour. So the judge in court told Akufo Addo, say, hey, you are dumb. You are not a lawyer. How did you become an Attorney General? Go back and rectify this problem. In Titama, that was when Kufour Addo should step aside and Akufo Jogate by. So Jogate was the Attorney General who made sure they scrutinized, they skewed the system to jail Tsatsu Tsikata. Jogate. Akufo Addo started the case. But Akufo Addo, early on, Kufour said no, Akufo Addo is a criminal. Akufo Addo does not know the things he's saying, and a legitimate lawyer, and that he's making fundamental mistakes in his applications, and that they realized that Akufo Addo was just it was just a hype. The woman who said Akufo Addo born so file case say Kufour against Tsatsu Tsikata. Ehona Kufour mu said abi akwa we sa dede kwa wabon onye lawyer papa quick eno mu ye Akufo Addo free on the Jogate be show eno mu change ye no Tsatsu Tsikata against the states and not against Ghana. Internet because it was the government of Ghana trying to sue Tsatsu Tsikata.